everybody. Today, my mommy is going to talk about Lyndon B. Johnson.
Thank you, Noah, for introducing Lyndon B. Johnson, the 36th President of the United States. Lyndon B. Johnson became the president very suddenly in November of 1963, following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. While the entire nation, including Lyndon B. Johnson, was grieving the loss of a very popular president, Johnson also recognized the need to pick up the pieces when he said, "Our institutions cannot be interrupted by an assassin's bullet." Despite the shocking events that led to Johnson becoming president, he was well prepared for the role. Lyndon Baines Johnson was born in Stonewall, Texas in 1908 and attended Southwest Texas State College. He took some time off from college to get a job to help pay off his personal debts. He did that by teaching at a school for underprivileged Mexican Americans. During his time there, he witnessed the lack of opportunity and racism that the students experienced. He was strict with his students and expected them to speak English both in and out of the classroom, although it was a second language to them. He helped create a free lunch program for the students. His efforts in helping the less fortunate would later continue through his presidency. In 1934, Lyndon B. Johnson married Claudia Alta Taylor, often called Lady Bird. She came from a wealthy family, which worked out nicely for Lyndon B. Johnson, who used some of their wealth to help finance his 1936 campaign to become a U.S. representative from his home state of Texas. He was successful and would serve 12 years in the House of Representatives, including a brief period where he served as lieutenant commander in the Navy during World War II. His 12 years in the House were immediately followed by 12 years as a U.S. Senator from Texas. During these 24 years in service, he was very well respected and played a pivotal role in working with both Republicans and Democrats to get important pieces of legislation passed, like increasing the minimum wage. During this time, he also managed to repay his wife and her family for generously helping to finance his first political campaign. He did so by buying a bankrupt radio station in Austin, Texas, and putting it in his wife's name. The radio station only made $18 in profit in the first year, but within 20 years, Lady Bird was earning $500,000 a year. That money was reinvested in real estate, making the Johnsons very wealthy. When John F. Kennedy ran for president in 1960, he offered the vice presidency to Lyndon B. Johnson. Many people, including Kennedy himself, were stunned when Johnson accepted the role of second fiddle because Johnson had more political status than Kennedy. It was the selection of Johnson as his running mate, along with Kennedy's strong performances against Richard Nixon in the televised debates, that allowed Kennedy to manage an election victory by the smallest of margins. Kennedy's assassination, less than 3 years into his first term, gave President Lyndon B. Johnson a unique opportunity. Many of the initiatives that Kennedy had were tied up in Congress. President Johnson used his political savvy to work the relationships he had with many congressional leaders to get things done with efficiency. He passed the massive Civil Rights Act that made all forms of discrimination based on race, religion, or ethnicity unlawful. In May of 1964, President Johnson announced what he called a war on poverty, and his plans to reduce poverty by utilizing America's wealth. He also improved the conditions in public schools by helping strengthen schools that were seen as inadequate, providing special education for less able students, and for Head Start, which was a preschool program for low-income communities. All of these efforts, in addition to his contributions with Medicare and Medicaid were summed up by what the president called the Great Society. His popularity was at an all-time high when he trounced Barry Goldwater in the election of 1964 by roughly 15 million votes and an electoral college landslide of 486 to 52. Despite the incredible work that President Johnson did to improve the lives of minorities, the poor, and the elderly in the United States, his legacy would be forever tarnished by events happening thousands of miles away in Vietnam. In August of 1964, the North Vietnamese used torpedoes to strike the U.S. destroyer Maddox in response to increasing American involvement in Vietnam. President Johnson responded to the strike by signing the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, which stated that the United States was prepared to take all necessary steps, including the use of armed force, to deal with aggression from North Vietnam. When former President Eisenhower left office in 1961, there were about 1,000 Americans in Vietnam. President Kennedy increased that number to 25,000 over the next 2 years. By May of 1966, President Johnson increased the number of American troops in Vietnam to over 460,000. The environment and terrain of Vietnam was hard for American troops to navigate, resulting in the loss of thousands of lives. 1968 was also a turbulent year in the United States, with race riots breaking out across the country and the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King and Robert F. Kennedy. President Johnson finally realized that the fighting in Vietnam was not worth the mounting casualties. He ordered an end to the bombing of North Vietnam and attempted peaceful negotiations instead. He also addressed the nation on TV to make the shocking announcement that he will not seek re-election. Join Olivia and her dad tomorrow when they get curious about Antarctica. Until next time, stay curious.
Here in America, work is in trouble. We've offshored our manufacturing, sent away good jobs, and lost so much ability to make things. American Giant is a company that's pushing back against this tide. They make high-quality clothing, sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more, right here in the USA. Visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com, promo code STAPLE20.